Welcome to everyone on a cold winter night. We're glad that we have all of you here tonight. The Town Meeting Coordinating Committee, once or twice a year, does a forum on something to help residents and especially town meeting members think about some of the issues that are going to be coming before the town. And certainly sustainability, greening, all of the important things that are happening in these areas are things that are beginning to come in some form to town meeting. So tonight we have a forum of 5 people from this area, including 3 from Amherst, and Carol Gray has organized the forum tonight and will be introducing our speakers. There will be a question period at the end, so if you have questions, keep them in mind.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're really pleased to have this great panel of experts to present to you tonight. They come with specialties that are really going to help us learn more about how we can green our town. And sustainability and the greening of our town is part of what is in our master plan. So sustainability is one of the main themes in the master plan. Section 2.3 talks about sustainability as a primary integrating goal of the Amherst community and this master plan. It calls for the master plan calls for promoting environmentally sound practices and services and facilities and supporting the principles of the town's climate action plan, which I think you'll probably hear more from Stephanie, who I think drafted a lot of it. And also it calls for exploring ways to reduce the town's energy consumption and implementing environmentally sound practices in public buildings and facilities, establishing a permanent standing town committee to oversee community energy policy. All of these things are part of what sustainability is all about, and you'll see on the program that we have available excerpts from the master plan that talk about sustainability and greening. So I'm going to start off with introducing Professor Al Warner. He has a very impressive resume. I'm just going to read a little bit from it. He is a professor of geology at Mount Holyoke College, where he has taught for 25 years. He's in the Department of Earth and Environment, and he before coming here, was with the University of Colorado as a graduate fellow and a research assistant at the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research, and a geological technician with the Research Planning Institute in Boulder. And one of the things that he's very excited about right now is he takes students up to the Arctic to look at how glaciers are melting and at what rate, and he's basically training them how to work on climate change and how we can get the best scientific data about that. He has a grant from the National Science Foundation, and he can tell you more about that. And he's going to give what's happening with the climate and explaining the science behind the crisis. It really is a crisis at this point. Thanks, Al.
Hi there. Kudos to Carol for organizing it on not the coldest day of the year, but actually one of the warmer times. It's always difficult to talk about climate change, global warming, when in fact it's freezing outside. So this makes it a little bit easier perhaps. I teach a whole class, a seminar class that deals with climate change. And I'm going to try to condense much of that into 10 minutes. Okay? Now you don't get any credit for this, no grades, no exams, but anyway, that's what we're going to do. You may remember this National Geographic publication that came out in 1988, and it was the first time that the public was exposed to this issue. And if you, maybe you haven't seen it for a while, but what it is a glass sphere. It's a hologram, it's a glass sphere, and it has a bullet that entered the sphere up here and it's discharging here. You can maybe see some of the glass shards here. And the subtitle here is, Can Man Save This Fragile Planet? And it was the first time that this issue was really delivered to the general public. About the same time, Scientific American came out with a publication dealing with climate change and said, boy, you guys should know there's something that's afoot here, and we might want to pay attention to it. So my point is that this is not a new sort of thing. This is something that we've been thinking about and exposed to for lots of years. But you may not know that it was originally, this greenhouse effect goes back to actually back in 1824. I believe this is the Fourier that the mathematician that developed the Fourier transform analysis and so on. There are a bunch of other players that were involved. And then Arrhenius is probably a name that may seem familiar to some of you. The Arrhenius equation in chemistry, a big contribution. So we knew about the greenhouse effect, and we knew even back in the 1800s that we could conceivably load the atmosphere with CO2 and then change climate. So my point is that this isn't totally new. The arguments have evolved over the years. In 1988, the year that I started at Mount Holyoke College, the argument was, well, there is no warming, so what's the big deal? Okay? Then it was, okay, there's a little bit of warming, but it's natural. It's part of natural variations in climate cycles. And then it was, and we like this in the climate change research business because there was a lot of funding associated with this, that it needs further study. And so there was a lot of people like me that were getting research grants to figure out how the climate had changed in the past in different parts of the system. And then, yeah, okay, it's real, but it's this is sort of the George Bush the Lesser, who argued that, okay, it's real, but we just can't deal with it. It's bad for the economy. It's bad stuff. And then, interestingly, in the last year, we're starting to see stuff like this, that we are the cause, but not to worry, we'll adapt. Okay? And this is it blew me away when I saw this. This is from the CEO of ExxonMobil. And seriously, acknowledging that, yes, climate change is real, but humans are really good at adapting and will just adapt to this like we've adapted to everything else over the eons. It all started back in the industrial period. This is a shot of the Cleveland skyline back in the 30s. And Cleveland, of course, was a big steel-producing place. They used lots of coal. And the skyline looked like this. And this process of burning carbon-based fuels, it doesn't matter if it's, dung on the savanna or cordwood or oil, gas, whatever, it produces CO2. You're taking carbon-based fuels, you're basically oxidizing them. It's a simple reaction, and then you're producing CO2, which then goes off into the atmosphere. Not all of this is CO2. In fact, you don't see the CO2. This is mostly water vapor, which is also a byproduct. Charles Keeling was a new PhD, and he got interested in this issue, and he went to Scripps and said, you know what? I think we better start measuring the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. And so he did, because he reasoned that we're producing a lot of it, and it's got to go someplace. And in fact, now we know that about half of it goes into the atmosphere. Some of it gets picked up by the biosphere through photosynthesis. The oceans pick up some through photosynthesis and also dissolving in the ocean water. And when Keeling started measuring the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere in I guess it was in the late 50s, the values were on the order of 310 parts per million, right? And that was like, okay. But then they started seeing some interesting changes. And in fact, we see this zigzag pattern here with a hint of an increase. And as we collected more and more data, we in fact saw that zigzag pattern. That's the seasonal leafing out in the northern hemisphere, increased photosynthetic activity, which then draws down CO2. And then in the fall, that vegetation dies off and rots and CO2 goes up. But that annual cycle has been overwhelmed by this increase in CO2. And this is not where we are today. We're actually up here at about 394 and change, which is pretty high. You'll see, I'll put that in context in just a minute. We can extend that record back, so this is the Keeling curve, different plot, same data, by looking at the ice bubbles in glacier ice. So we can take cores from Antarctica, from Greenland, even small ice caps, and we can melt the ice, capture that gas, and measure how much CO2 is in it. And we can extend this record back in time to around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where these data tell us that we were below 290 parts per million CO2 level in the atmosphere. So during this time, we've increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere substantially. And this has been due primarily to both land clearing early on, but then especially when we started getting industrialized, fossil fuel use. And now you can see that fossil fuel use is the tail that's wagging this emissions dog. So here's the issue. The amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has been directly related to the amount of temperature change on planet Earth through time. This is a core from Antarctica in the southern hemisphere, and it shows in blue the CO2, and you can see it poking out there in a few places because the temperature, the reconstructed temperature using oxygen isotope data, lies right on top of it. When we have low CO2, we have colder temperatures. When we have higher CO2, we have higher temperatures. So lower. Use the microphone. Oh, sorry. Lower temperatures are associated with lower CO2 levels. Yep. And this is the sort of natural range of variability for that interval. This goes back on the order of 350,000 years ago. Here's where we are today at 394. So one of the points I want you to leave with is that we are pushing this climate system to a place that is outside of its natural range of variability. We can actually extend these data back even further. These are new data from Antarctica, a long core that goes back 800,000 years. It's almost 1 million years. Again, showing the CO2 and the reconstructed temperature, and then also the methane. And here we are with CO2 and methane way up here. And methane is very important because it's a very potent greenhouse gas. And again, this is the range of natural variability. And we, in fact, have to go back. It's debated a lot in the literature, but at least 3 million years to get CO2 levels that are this high. Many people would argue 15 million years, and a few would argue dinosaur time, so before 65 million years ago. It's easy to reconstruct CO2 from ice cores. It's really hard to do it from the geologic record. You have to do things like look at fossil leaves and count the number of stomata on the leaf surface. Think of this as the developed countries, and this is the developing countries, and this is where we are today. And as we project to the future, we can expect the developing countries to be contributing more CO2 into the atmosphere. And this will be because we're going to be using more fossil fuels. This is going to be driven by the GDP increasing, increase in energy use. That basically is this curve right there. And the CO2 is going to continue to rise along with it. Right? This is not my data. This is data from BP. Energy companies are very concerned about projecting what their income is going to be into the future. And so these are their data, and this is their projection of what CO2 in the atmosphere is going to be doing. Now, this projecting climate change into the future is really tricky, and it's done mostly with climate models, which are not foolproof. They're not 100% accurate, but they point in the general direction plus or minus. Each colored line here represents a different climate research lab that has run a different model. And the point I want to stress here is that they all show an increase Not one of them says that we're going to experience cooling, ranging from just over 2 degrees to about 5 degrees centigrade. So the overall trend is going to be increasing temperatures, global temperatures. This is the thing that is really scary, and I don't think gets enough press, is that, let's say, here we are today, here we are 100 years from now, and this is peak CO2 emissions, and then either because we have used all the fossil fuel, or in fact we decide we're going to address this issue, the amount of emissions goes down and stays down for 1,000 years, right? The amount in the atmosphere actually stabilizes and plateaus. It doesn't drop. The residence time of CO2 in the atmosphere is thousands of years, it's not decades. So to get it out of the atmosphere and secure it and store it geologically is a long-term thing. So we can't just sort of change our ways and everything's all better. Okay? And then with this, temperature will also increase and sort of steadily rise, and sea level is also going to rise. So this is pretty dire story. Is our goose cooked? Well, yeah, maybe. The different scenarios are based on how we deal with emissions, how we deal with this problem. And this is not a good situation. This forces the climate change to be happening faster and in a very unpredictable way. A better situation would be CO2 emissions and warming that takes us down this road. And there's a lot of reasons to want to do that. So the question is, what are we going to do? Which route are we going to take? And I think that's what this group sort of can plug into. If we go this route, where we worry about emissions and we reduce emissions and therefore reduce warming, we can have less overall impact, more time to study and understand the changes and the systems that we're dealing with, and more time to adapt to the certain changes that are going to be happening. So the good news situation of this is that our goose isn't completely cooked. What we do in the next few decades matters. It's not sort of throw up your hands and say, oh, so what? We can't do anything about it, so what? It really matters that we get on this track rather than one of these others. This is a projection, again, based on climate models of what the Earth is going to be like at the turn of the century. So this is between 2070 and 2100. And it's a little bit funny to look at, but what it is it's a temperature difference or a temperature anomaly map that says how much different relative to this interval, 1960 to 1990, the climate will be. And so if it was exactly the same at the end of the century as it was during this reference interval, then you'd see basically white colors. And if it's out towards 6 degrees C warmer, then you're talking about substantial warmth here. This is where the Brazilian rainforest is. This is where the Arctic sea ice is and where the permafrost is. And so we've got some changes if, in fact, we don't make some changes. Lots of issues: melting glaciers, ice caps and valley glaciers, rising sea levels, more numerous storms, more powerful storms, melting of permafrost, which releases more methane into the environment and causes lots of other problems. CO2 dissolving in ocean water is corrosive. It creates a weak acid, and that acid makes it hard for organisms trying to grow shells, especially small photosynthetic organisms. More flooding, more drought, and then more sea ice issues in the high latitudes. One thing that has not gotten a lot of attention that I'm really watching are these things called methane hydrates. These are, think of them as methane ice. And this is ice that you can physically light on fire because it's got methane in it. And there's lots of this stuff And the thinking is that, in fact, I'm getting the evil time card. Almost done. That these hydrates could be destabilized and released into the atmosphere and then abruptly change the climate. Take-home message, we are adding CO2 in the atmosphere. We're measuring it. There's no doubt about it. And we can put that into the context of past levels. We are now starting to see significant changes. I think we're developing a feel for those, the storm frequency and intensity, the glaciers melting. We're hearing about sea level rise in places. Future changes seem likely, but it's the degree of those changes that's important. And the amount and the rate of change ultimately is what is going to give us time to adapt and to deal with the situation. So our goose is not cooked, but the skillet is definitely getting hot. And I think it's time to make some changes. So I'll stop there.
Okay, our next, he definitely deserves applause. I'll ask you to hold your applause and do it all at the end if you don't mind, just so we can keep on schedule here. And also, future speakers, please try to use the mic because the TV is filming and they'll pick it up a little bit better with the mic. We're very happy to have Stephanie Ciccarello speak next. She has worked for the town of Amherst since 1997. She was simultaneously the Energy Task Force Coordinator and Wetlands Administrator for 9 years and has recently become the town's Sustainability Coordinator in 2011. She went to UMass Boston and has a Master's of Science from Antioch University. And she hasn't mentioned it on her bio, but I think you helped draft a large part of the Climate Action Plan, or at least were very part of that whole process. Oh, she's going to talk about that. Anyway, we're very happy to have her. And Stephanie, take it away.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you this evening. I'll start with my position, which is new, my role as Sustainability Coordinator, and I drafted, I'm sort of buying some time here, I drafted a bit of a mission statement of what that position is. Sorry. So the role as Sustainability Coordinator is to seek grants and opportunities to meet the towns of Amherst's goals of greater energy independence and sustainability, while at the same time fostering working relationships with Amherst citizens and championing and moving a sustainable community agenda forward. So personally, I feel very strongly that my position is not just about what we do here in Town Hall, but what you as residents want to see happening and how I can help you have that happen. And that I'll talk about some of the initiatives that I'm working on with some community members as we move along here. So I do want to say that we have been working on climate issues for a while here in Amherst. Some of you may know that, some of you may not. We had an intern come to the department, the Conservation Department, and created an Amherst greenhouse gas emissions inventory. This was released in 2001. You may not have seen this, you may have. I can certainly scan it and make it available to you if you would like to take a good look at it. But this was based on 1997 data. And the reason why our intern chose that data at that time was because we were trying to go back in time to get complete records of our energy use. And some of the software we used was provided by an organization called ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. And ICLEI provided software that the town paid for, and we used that to create our inventory. The problem is that inventory, and I'm sure Dr. Werner would support this, especially as a town municipality, it's a bit clunky, not particularly accurate. It divided the town up into sectors. The sectors were residential, commercial, industrial, but we have 3 large institutions, so where to put them? It was a little problematic for us. And when we did an update of the inventory later on, you know, again, the software had changed, and so that was problematic because now the software changed and we felt like we weren't really comparing apples to apples. So We did create a climate action plan that came out in 2005. It was based on the assumptions of our original inventory, and we set a goal for a 35% reduction in CO2 levels by 2009. I can tell you that we did not meet that goal. And in fact, our emissions actually increased a bit by roughly about 18%. Now, there are reasons why. Some of it had to do with the software. So before you gasp and get all horrified, some of that really has to do with the problems with the software package that we used. We really just think we had different interns working on it at different times. Their approaches were different. We tried to sort of keep it as consistent as we could, but we just didn't feel that that data was really that accurate. So measuring CO2 in a municipality is kind of challenging. So even though we didn't meet that goal, at that time, around the time when we were going to do an update and release another inventory and release a revised climate action plan, and we do have a draft, it's almost completed even, for a revised climate action plan, the Green Communities Act had passed in the state, and there was a real push for us to become a green community. When I did this work, I was only really allotted 4 hours per week to work on it. My job was primarily as wetlands administrator, and there wasn't really much time. So this pressure to work on becoming a green community sort of shifted our focus a bit. With the Green Communities Act, cities and towns could sign on. They had to create a 5-year energy reduction plan. So in dealing with our carbon dioxide emissions, the main way to achieve that was by reducing our energy load. My feeling about the Green Communities program is first that it's brilliant because it gives communities incentive via a pot of money to do energy efficiency strategies within their community. But at the same time, it's addressing climate change. It's addressing CO2 reduction because the goal is to get communities to reduce their energy consumption, and that's one of the primary ways in which we can reduce our CO2 emissions. So it sounds like it's just about energy use, but really it's about CO2 reduction too. So we signed on and we became a green community, and right now we're focusing more on our energy reduction, not specifically just CO2 levels. So it's not that we're not thinking about it, it's not that we're moving towards that, it's just that we're not inventorying them in the same way. We have to find a new strategy to quantify what those are. So Green Communities Program, we applied for Green Communities designation in May 2012. We received the designation in August, and then we applied for a Green Communities grant in September 2012. Now, when we became a green community, the state allots a certain amount to each community, and the assumption is that we just got that money. We didn't actually just get that money, we had to apply for it. So we applied for the grant, and then we were awarded $302,000, and we're using it specifically to retrofit our streetlights to LED streetlights, and that was in November of 2012. So that will be a significant savings. That's actually will be a 4% reduction in our electricity use and our 1.4% reduction in our overall energy use, just for that one measure. So it's pretty significant. And the other thing that came out of this Green Communities application and process is that, as I mentioned, we have an energy reduction plan now. We have a 5-year plan. We have a table of measures outlined, and again, you'll be able to have access to that on the town's website, which I'll be mentioning in a minute. But you'll have access to that, and you can see in the table the different measures. Some of them aren't particularly interesting. They're kind of like boiler replacements and that kind of thing. But some of them are a little more interesting and a little more exciting. So, as Carol mentioned, this really, this work that I'm doing really is part of Amherst's master plan. It's directly related to promoting an ethic of sustainable environmental energy practices in all town activities. And there are several of these objectives that are highlighted within that plan. I'm going to go back because I think I missed a slide here. Sorry. There we go. Other initiatives. So we are really moving towards that goal of sustainability within the master plan, and actually it's kind of more of a better segue. Some of the initiatives that we're doing right now, partnering with the Mass Rides program to promote, this is a national effort, New Ride, which is alternative transportation to single occupancy vehicle transportation. So instead of people just getting in their cars, we want people to ride their bikes, take the bus, carpool. And so we've been promoting that by trying to promote that to employees, town employees. We have about 43, I believe, town employees signed up right now who are dedicated to using some alternative form rather than just driving in the car by themselves. We have a sustainability section that is on the town's website. I swear it exists. We haven't been able to go live because we had some final little things that we have to do to it, but I'm very, very proud of this sustainability section, and it will be probably going live, I'm hoping next week. I was really hoping it would be live today, but you can cheat a little bit and get to it if you go on the search engine and just type in sustainability. If it comes up Sustainable Amherst, just click on that and it will take you right to the brand new sustainability section. And so you can peruse it a little bit before we go live with it, so you can get a sneak peek. Another initiative that I'm working on is Grow Food Amherst. I'm working with a group of very committed, energetic, and wonderful Amherst residents and folks from the various institutions here in town on looking at ways that we can have more access to healthy local food that's not just a community garden model. We have community gardens in town and it's wonderful and we're not going to take them away. We don't want them to go away. But we want to find a way in which we can make local food more accessible to everyone, and then it's more of a community endeavor where we help each other. So we had a gleaning event I believe it was in September, October. We followed the gleaning event with a cooking and canning demonstration. There was also a fruit tree planting at some of the local schools. And now in the spring, we're going to be working on what we're calling the 350 Garden Challenge, where we're hoping to get 350 Amherst residents to sign on and commit to plant 100 new gardens in town. And that will be a way in which people can work together to help each other. Again, it's not just you doing something in your yard by yourself or going to the community gardens. It's really like, what tools do you have? Do you have space in your yard? Can I work with you? So we're really wanting to foster this sense of community. And that's something, again, that you can go on a website and search growfoodamherst.org. And there's lots of information, and we would love it if you would sign on and be part of this. The next thing I'm working on is a solar hot water system on the wastewater treatment plant. This wastewater treatment plant requires a certain amount of domestic hot water that has to be consistent throughout the year. In the wintertime, they rely on oil. In the summertime, they rely on electricity use, and it's a real drain. And we realized that there was this program out there where we could get a grant for doing a feasibility study. So right now, we're in the feasibility study phase, and we're I see, and that's okay. And we're having a feasibility study done to see exactly how much we can save, how much energy we can save, how much money we can save, and it looks to be fairly significant. And hopefully that's the start of one of our solar installations. I'm hoping that we can do a lot more at the wastewater treatment plant. And I should mention that the wastewater treatment plant, out of all the municipal buildings, that's our biggest energy user. And then I'm also assisting the Public Transportation and Bicycle Committee with a bicycle shelter campaign. We really felt like we're promoting this new ride program and we really want to increase ridership, bicycle ridership in town. And we have these wonderful bike lanes, but we really need places for people to put their bikes. And people who commute to work, the comment I've heard is, you know, it's great, we want to ride to work, but I have this expensive bike and I really don't want to lock it up for 8 hours where I can't see it, have access to it, it's just out in the open, and it's not protected from the elements. So we're looking to see if there's a way in which we can find some grants or find some ways to have bike shelters and or preferably both installed along some central areas in town. So as I said, we are, all of this is part of the master plan. And then I just pulled out some objectives that are actually in the master plan that pertain to some of the work that I've been doing and have done in the past. So, these are just, I'm not going to go through them all. I just wanted you to see that there really are very specific things that are being addressed here in town. I hope, there'll be a lot more. There'll be a lot more that we're working on as time goes along and we sort of have a better sense of what folks are looking for. So if you want to contact me, here's my contact information. If you are curious about what happens with this position, we have a logo now. I should say I have a logo. Sustainable Amherst, the idea is that a sustainable Amherst is in our hands, and collectively that means the citizens as well as what we do here in Town Hall. We really need to all work together towards this goal of really making this community sustainable, and especially specifically in relation to climate change. So, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go next to Susan Waite, who is the recycling person in town, who her background is in adult education and development. She has a master's there and also has had a career in human resources. And she is now the Town of Amherst Recycling Coordinator. This is a part-time position funded via the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, and her job focuses on public education, waste stream reduction, and general support of the town's transfer station and recycling and refuse management committee. She formerly was part of the Buffalo Exchange, a national recycled clothing store chain headquartered in Tucson, Arizona. So she has experience in other parts of the country as well, and also had worked as a professional in Madison, Wisconsin, with a training and development manager at a rural mutual insurance company. So she comes with numerous skills, and I think it was her committee that helped to draft the styrofoam ban that came before town meeting last fall and was passed, and so we're happy to have Susan.
Thank you, Carol. Where to start? Current priorities in Amherst. Where are we going here? Which button do I push? This one? Okay. There are two basic things that we're focused on, my position and the Recycling Committee both. The first is to determine a way for the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund to become self-sustaining while maintaining existing services. Those existing services being the transfer station operations, my position, and the work that I do for the public education and with the Recycling Committee. And then third, the monitoring and maintenance of our existing landfills. Second, what to do with the trash collected at the transfer station when local landfills close. Those are our two key priorities. The Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, as you probably all know, is a fund that is outside of the general tax fund that is supposed to be self-sustaining. It was created in 1982, our fund, and at that time we had an active landfill, and those active that we had, then we had another active landfill, and landfills are kind of cash cows for communities when they're open. Somebody said that they're a short-term profit center and a long-term expense center. So at that time when this was created, we had a lot of money coming in. It is now 30 years later. Our last landfill closed 10 years ago, and there's the cushion that had been there has slowly eroded. We have now services that people come to expect don't often realize that they're not from the general fund. People assume that they're from the general fund. They're wanting these services to continue, and we need to find a way to make the fund sustainable. So that's one of our big goals. Let's see. So finding where to put the waste. Where are we going to send our waste? The local landfills in this area either are closing soon or will be closing fairly soon. And one of the things the Recycling and Refuse Management Committee has looked at is, what do we recommend? What do we feel should happen with our waste? Where do we send? Where's that a way that we send it to? And it's now taken to the South Hadley landfill, and the Recycling Committee isn't thrilled with with their alternatives. There aren't many thrilling alternatives out there, and they've come to the conclusion that the best thing to focus on is reducing the waste that we do produce so that it's less of a problem where we put it. We need to start looking at the waste stream, pulling out aspects of that are reusable, that can be sold, that can be turned into soil amendments, and make those changes. So one place to send it is to a landfill. And there are pros and cons with both of these, and as I said, the recycling committee couldn't decide which one was the lesser of the two evils. A landfill has a benefit of having trash in a concentrated area. It can be maintained, it can be watched, it can be maintained and watched. But the problem is when you concentrate that much trash in one area, it's also a high risk. So it can be a high risk. Technology has changed throughout the years, so based on the age of your landfill, the bottom liner and the cap, is going to be different. So there's a lot of different things going on. The U.S. has lots of land for potential new sites, but is that really how we want to use our natural resources? It turns out that Massachusetts is the highest cost in the nation for landfill tipping fees, and places like Idaho are some of the lowest cost. So what happens is when you have a $100 per ton tipping fee average in Massachusetts, whether or not you run out of room in your local landfills, it's going to be really attractive to send your trash somewhere else. And then it has a transportation footprint and has a whole host of other issues. Massachusetts landfills also have comparatively high minimal standards for our landfills, which is a really good thing. But when you talk about sending your trash to another state, all of that goes away. And so you don't know what their standards are. You don't know, you can't feel good about it. So there's a lot of risks associated with sending our material away. Guilford Mooring, our superintendent, recently got a call from a landfill in the state of Georgia who's interested in having our waste shipped down to them via train. And and guess what? It was an economically viable solution. It was an affordable solution. And so, is this the direction that we want to be going in? The committee didn't think so. Another way is to an incineration facility. And incinerators now generate some portion of energy, which is captured when it burns. Modern incinerators are a lot better than the original incinerators that you heard about in the 1970s and 1980s, but there are still issues with emissions, and they're of grave concern to some people. So is that something that we want to be doing? The benefits are that it reduces the volume by 90% so that you don't have this huge amount of stuff. It doesn't reduce the weight by 90%, but it reduces the volume. But you still have the bottom ash, which is heavy. Some metals can be extracted from it that weren't pulled out when it was burned. But you still have the bottom ash. You still have the top ash, which is a fairly toxic kind of material that needs now to be disposed of. Let's see. It does produce energy, but it is not very efficient at the capture of the caloric value of municipal solid waste. And it is also somewhat indiscriminate burning in that there might be some material in there that could be captured and used in some other way. Another way is litter. I'm not going to go into the details of that. You all know the perils of litter and what it can do to our ocean creatures and the creatures on the land. It can be dangerous if it's toxic or has, like for instance, needles and sharp things can be dangerous as well. The thing that I want to highlight is that if you don't price your trash appropriately, people will start chucking it in the woods, and people will start throwing it out the window in the highway. So this is something we need to be really careful about when we're looking at the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund and how to raise the fund, the income level for that fund. We can't just keep pricing our trash higher and higher. We just can't do that because there's some other risks involved. And the cost to the communities of remediation and cleaning up the litter is pretty high. So what are we talking about when we talk about municipal solid waste? This is data from the Department of Environmental Protection's waste characterization studies. They require waste energy incinerators to annually, I think, I'm looking over there, is it annually? Do a real in-depth study of what the waste is that's coming into their facility. So this is the first kind of batch of information, and you can see that there's a lot of paper that can be recycled, a lot of organics that can be pulled out and composted. There's a lot of material that's now getting burned, and we can assume that this is a pretty accurate representation of what's going into landfills too. So we need to take a look at what we can do to pull this stuff out of here to reduce our trash. These are also, this data is by weight, so it doesn't talk about volume. There's lots that we can pull out. C&D is construction and demolition debris, just so you know. So the recycling committee just has said that they've decided that it's essentially more important than what we do with trash is to reduce, we need to reduce the amount that we produce. And I found this really lovely quote that really is beautifully put by a general manager of a solid waste authority in California. And he says, "The real challenge is accepting the responsibility for what we manufacture, for what we consume, and for the market-driving decisions we all make as consumers. Like a 12-step recovery program, we have to first acknowledge and accept our individual and corporate responsibility in creating this mess. Then and only then can we constructively make good decisions on how to further reduce waste." So then I want to just talk about briefly zero waste. This is where the committee is recommending that Amherst focus our energies on. Zero waste is an aspirational goal. Some people have a real problem with the term zero waste because it's impossible to have zero waste. But it's an aspirational goal, something to shoot for. It's an ethical, economic, efficient, and visionary goal to guide people in changing their lifestyles and practices to emulate sustainable natural cycles where all discarded materials are designed to become resources for others to use. When you think of a tree falling in the forest, it becomes a resource for others to use. And, bugs live in it, bugs eat it, you know, it decomposes and helps grow other things in the forest. So it's a really beautiful process, and zero waste wants to emulate that through making people focus on what they're producing to begin with. So some possible zero waste components. Pay-as-you-throw garbage system. We have a modified pay-as-you-throw if you have a variance and take your trash to the transfer station. You pay by the bag. The less trash you produce, the less you pay. It rewards people for recycling. It rewards people for less trash. Another component is single-stream recycling. This is a little controversial because while communities claim, and it's proven that participation in recycling programs increases with single-stream recycling, there are also some risks, one of which being that the actual material, based on the sorting facility that it goes to, if you throw everything into one container, paper and containers into one container, the paper can get soiled. One of the things you don't want with paper recycling is oils. So if you throw your oily something on top of your oily, your olive oil bottle on top of your paper and it's all in one container, that's going to contaminate the paper recycling. And oil and water don't mix. So paper recycling and oil is a real problem. So that's the kind of problem that can ensue. That being said, municipalities like West Springfield and Springfield are finding it more economical to move to single stream. In fact, UMass just changed to single stream. Because of the impact of participation, it is cheaper to pay someone to sort the single stream into the different streams than it is to pay the tipping fees, the increased tipping fees at the landfills. So that's another piece. Commercial and residential composting is another thing that can happen and that we're hoping to have available sometime in the future in Amherst. The committee is very excited about making that available to people. Product stewardship. The point of product stewardship is not a punitive thing for manufacturers and retailers. It's to incentivize them to develop better products. When a manufacturer is responsible for the end of the life cycle of its products, then they're incentivized to have their product development engineers come up with ways to find, to make their product either more compostable, more reusable, or more recyclable. When you think of the plastic housing on some of our electronics, unless they have an incentive to start putting their brain power towards those issues, it's not going to happen. So that's part of the logic behind producer responsibility. And then resource recovery parks, which are somewhat similar to our transfer station, except a little on steroids, so that there would be a whole bunch of different places that you could leave your various different kinds of waste. So waste sorting and waste sorting is becoming really big. Yep, I just have couple more little quick things. So current trends in waste. We talked about some single stream recycling, organic separation. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission has spent some time looking at organics in the Pioneer Valley. They have a report that's available. We have some anaerobic digesters that are looking to potentially locate the Pioneer Valley, which would be really, really exciting, because then we would have a place to send our organic waste once we start collecting it. Producer responsibility is something that's happening more and more. In California, the paint companies are taking responsibility for the leftover paint. And if you think that that's not a incentive for them to develop better ways of helping people estimate how much paint they're going to use and better delivery systems, then I have a point to argue with you about that. People are speaking out, and municipalities are banning things. So, for instance, in South Hadley and Northampton, people complained about the landfill. They complained about the smells. They don't want them to expand. Municipal bans. In Lexington, they just banned bottled water. We just banned expanded polystyrene. The Brookline just banned plastic bags. So it's communities are starting to say, no, we don't want to support this. We need to find better ways. Special waste collections, such as the one that Northampton does with rigid, bulky plastics, and increased reuse opportunities. Again, Northampton has a reuse committee that is doing a lot of great stuff. They had a toy swap. They're having community tag sales, etc. So there's lots of exciting things going on. This is, Kermit is one of my personal faves. It's not easy being green, especially when it comes to waste, but it's also important to be green, and it's an important thing to strive for, and we need to make it happen. It isn't easy, and in some ways it is, because we're in some ways going back to things that our grandparents did, but it's going to mean making some tough choices. It's going to mean behavior change, loss of convenience and sacrifice, and potentially an increased cost out of pocket in the short term. And then we need to convince all the others who aren't in this room that it's the right thing to do and that we need to do it. So it's not easy, but we're up to the task, and join me. Thank you.
Susan. Our next speaker is going to be Bernard Brennan, and Bernard has a PhD in behavioral ecology from Cornell University, as well as permaculture and master gardener certificates. And when he received the Governor's Climate Change Leadership Award, called the Climate Hero, for his work in Connecticut. Nationally, he chairs the board of Green America and serves locally on the Agricultural Commission. He owns and manages Amethyst Farm on Northeast Street. And you may have seen on the cover of the Gazette, and I believe it was also in, was it the Advocate, that the picture of Bernard with his draft horses, going from tractors back to using draft horses to be more sustainable. And I saw him on the cover. I said, oh, he's on our panel. Anyway, he also is part of the transition movement, which he'll tell you more about. He initiated the Transition Greater New Haven, Transition Greater New Haven, the 30th official transition initiative in the United States, and Transition Amherst, which is the 101st transition community in the United States. And he'll tell you more about that.
Thank you, Carol. forward? Yes. Great. Okay. Thank you again, Carol. The transition movement. What do we mean by transitioning? We mean transitioning to a lower energy future, both because it's what we are going to be forced to do, what we have to do, and what we want to do anyway. It is an international movement in its scope, but very local in its focus. One place to start is why are we even talking about this? And make a very long story short, so I want to concentrate on the environment, energy, and the economy as three aspects of a highly interrelated set of crises that we're facing and that we have to deal with. I'm very happy to have spoken after Al. I only have one bit of additional data to put up, but I assume he's covered climate change, so we can move on. It's important. The end of cheap energy. One aspect of it is peak oil, not the only aspect, but it's a concise way to speak about it. By definition, a non-renewable resource is something that will run out. We're not really so worried about it actually running out. The interesting time happens when you have extracted about half of that resource. That's the time, the peak of this curve, at which you can no longer continue to increase the amount of energy you produce in any given amount of time. What does that mean? It puts serious limits on growth. It means that the rest of the energy, carbon-based energy you're extracting, if I'm talking about fossil fuels here, is more expensive because it's much harder to get. You've taken the easy stuff, now we're going deeper, farther, fracking, etc. So it's more expensive. Inherently, it's more expensive because we can't make as much of it as we used to make, so it's more expensive. And of course, it's much dirtier, having climate change and other impacts. I say these things are very interrelated. I can't go through all of those. Some of them are obvious. The use of energy is a primary driver, the primary driver of climate change. The effects of climate change are things economically we cannot afford to deal with. But I think it's very interesting, is there a pointer? Sort of the connection here between the end of cheap energy and economic situation is if we can no longer continue to grow our energy base, and basically I should say we are, for the most part, at peak energy now. I mean, you can argue, was it 5 years ago, is it 5 years from now? It's inevitable. We're going to have to deal with this. There has never been in history an economy which experienced growth without a commensurate growth in the energy base that it was growing on. So that suggests that, well, as our local economy or our national economy starts to do a little bit better, there's an increased demand for energy that raises the price of that energy, which then pushes down any kind of economic growth. We can't grow our way out of this set of problems. In fact, some will argue growth itself is the root cause of much of this problem. So what do? How will this stuff affect us? Again, make a very long story short, the transition, and by no means the only advocate of this, is to relocalize, to do more of what we need to do locally, because it is in the short term beneficial for us as selfishly, and a way to adapt with problems that are coming, but also writ large, done more broadly, it can directly address this triumvirate of problems. When we talk about relocalization, common first kinds of steps, we're looking at food, energy, transportation, building, different forms of exchange, money, currency, governance. Medical is not on that list. It should be cultural. Many of us are interested in local economies, and this is a list of many of the things we're currently working on, things that we should be working on as a governing body as well. Because time is short, I won't read all the list, but in fact, you saw many of these items in some of Stephanie's material, which is nice to see. In the transition movement, we talk a lot about resilience. Again, not the only ones that do it, and we try to make connections. Resilience means still being recognizable entity in the face of perturbation. How do we create systems that work for us now and will probably work for us in futures that we can't well predict, that will be more or less adaptable. So relocalizing, talking about, energy, for example, distributed renewable energy is a much better idea than concentrated fossil fuel energy. Growth is an issue. Can we imagine a steady state economy versus one that is based on debt and therefore growth? Don't have all the answers, but this is a clear problem. Also moving from sort of individual solutions to collective. We can't solve this alone. We need to work together. Transition model has been compared to yet another 12-step program. It is by no means fixed in stone or prescriptive. These are many of the steps that transition initiatives go through. It's evolving as people like us all over the world invent new and better ways to get things done that work for ourselves and the planet. Basic principles, we have a lot of fun, actually, when we get together. It's not all the doom and gloom, although many of us start from there and then look to a future, a low-energy future, which in many ways can be preferable to a cheap energy past that we've had. Thanks. Particularly from environmental and social relationship points of view. There are benefits, real benefits of having mutual dependent relationships among community members. So we work collaboratively. We try to, in this valley there are so many wonderful groups. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel so much as connect the dots. Like a 12-step program, if you will, attending to the inner transition, that change is coming, loss is part of that, dealing with sort of inner and outer issues is part of the transition model. So that's the big model. What are we doing here in Amherst? Our group is relatively new, still, well, I'll leave it at that. But we've already done a lot of kind of skill sharing events where we teach each other practical, useful things we know, things we can share, things that are useful now, that will be useful in the future. We've done a lot of public outreach, including movies and some speakers, guided walks to get to know our community neighbors better. I'll move on. We have a number of working groups. Please don't read all of that. It's just ripped off our website. But I'll mention, the skill sharing, the outreach kind of things. We have a lot of bike enthusiasts in our group working on bikeability and it's bamboo trailers, for example. How do we grow them, build them, and use them? We have a local lending group starting up where we are trying to encourage investing in ourselves instead of some corporate entity far away that's mostly extractive. Neighborhood associations, what does a transition street look like? A robot, do we know our neighbors? Are we collaborating where we can, sharing what we can, raising all boats together? Helping Hands is an idea of bringing together work crews. Grow Food Amherst is something that we support, that we have several members involved in. Stephanie talked about that. I won't go further into it. I do want to give a quick plug, because I have you here, about the All Things Local store, also trying to come to fruition right now, and something close to my heart. So in a nutshell, imagine a year-round indoor farmers market where everything is sold by producer in an information-rich environment, but the producers don't have to stand there all day. There's one checkout place. This is a low overhead and shared risk model where everything is sold on consignment, but a very high percentage of the sale price goes back to the producer. So it's a way to have small startup cottage industry kinds of businesses cooperate and have a place to sell, and it's an easy place for consumers, buyers, who want to support local things to have convenient location, convenient hours with a single conventional checkout location. We are currently looking for a location. So if, again, a plug, if anybody knows of something 2,000 to 4,000 square foot in town, let me know. I'll move on, but I'm excited about that. forward. Richard Heinberg, author of Peak Everything, among other things, has a nice quote. What do we need to do? What does transition look like? We move away from consumption and emphasize whatever increases quality of life without increasing consumption. I'm also going to take the opportunity to make a few big picture suggestions, again, because this is related to our local legislative body. I want to suggest that we facilitate living locally, part of our master plan to relocalize. What does that mean? Of course, we can do, and I support all of these dedicated, proactive kinds of things, but we can also go a long way in helping ourselves by removing obstacles, things that worked for us in the past that don't currently work for us. I point out zoning as one of those things. We, like most Americans, live in a use-based zoning system, which basically says you're going to live here, work here, play there, farm. It separates aspects of life, where there are now several brilliant initiatives at form-based zoning codes, which basically say this is the form of the building we encourage. You know, imagine a village center with a 3-story and short setback from the road, which is pedestrian and bicycle friendly, but which allows mixed uses, which allows people to live, work, play, all within a vicinity that makes it easier not to be wholly dependent on a personal automobile in the future. So the next point, and I need a better PR person than myself, I've called it, let's become a right to thrive locally community. And this is by analogy to a right to farm community. As many of you know, Amherst is a right to farm community. So legislatively, what does that mean? It says we value and support agriculture, and we're basically going to permit, with a few restrictions that make sense, but we're going to permit farming, and then only legislatively restrict those exceptions. But anything normal and commonly done in farming is part of what we have here. By extension, what would that look like to be able to encourage residents, neighborhoods to live locally? One of them is what I've called, support the providing for ourselves kinds of things. What was it, a year ago, several of us fought to have backyard chickens. We could make a list of the 100 things we want to do and fight every battle. I suggest that's an inefficient way to govern and get to where we need to get to more efficiently. Wouldn't it be better to suggest subsistence or sustenance activities are supported, and then we will legislate those exceptions? And I've listed several of the things that nationally there are many battles over. They don't all apply here. But this suggests we can do better for ourselves by producing things for ourselves. But we also need to make a living for those things we don't produce for ourselves. And what does that look like in the future? I'm suggesting we also support the idea of cottage industries, that our current housing stock of single-family houses that are wholly consumption-based need also to become centers of production. And what does that look like? Do we say, we will allow someone to knit, or pick and do them one at a time, or do we turn it around and say, we support cottage industries, and then of course, within reason of public safety or things that might prevent your neighbors from engaging in similar activities, we would collectively agree don't make sense, but support these kind of activities. Suggestions, big picture suggestions. Our choice is we will be transitioning to a lower energy future, whether we like it or not. I think the question is, how are we going to do this? And I'll close with this cheerful disclaimer. We have no idea if this is going to work. We've never faced this kind of situation before. We've certainly never run this experiment before. But we have to try and fight the good fight, if you will. Try to do our best. The next question is, at what scale do we do that at? We certainly have experience on the national governmental level that often solutions are too slow, too little, too late. At an individual level, me just changing my light bulb certainly is too little. But if we act as a community at at a human scale with people we know, it might just be enough just in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. And our last speaker is Catherine Rotte. She is the principal planner / manager of the Land Use and Environmental section of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. She's worked at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for 14 years. Her work there includes serving 43 member municipalities in Hampshire and Hampden counties. She has worked on sustainability, currently facilitating development and implementation of the region's first food security plan, and leading efforts to engage citizens in sustainability practices. She's administering the Live Well Springfield Centers for Disease Control Community Transformation Grant, that's a mouthful, which helps to promote healthy behavior in Springfield, including expanding farmers markets, assisting with efforts to bring a full-line grocery store to the downtown, and promoting walking, biking, and rowing. Rowing. Yes. And she has an interesting background before coming to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. She was with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and was served in the Peace Corps in Cameroon, and was with the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault. She has a master's degree in urban and regional planning and social work from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And here's Catherine.
And she forgot that I grew up in Amherst. My dad used to teach at Amherst College, and I grew up on Snell Street. And I was telling Susan, we all had paper routes, 4 kids in the family, and we all had paper routes from Hastings, and we all hung out at Hastings in the 70s on the stairs eating penny candy. Another thing that doesn't exist anymore. So the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, how many of you are familiar with us? All right, so everybody knows what we do. Okay, I'm done. We essentially do kind of everything that Bernard does at the local level, but on behalf of the region. So I guess I'm here to say that the government is working. As Stephanie said, the town of Amherst government is doing a ton of work on sustainability. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, we're a quasi-governmental entity. Regional planning agencies were enabled by legislation in Massachusetts 50 years ago, and we serve, as Carol pointed out, the 43 cities and towns in the Pioneer Valley. The state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, also is doing a lot. We have a very forward-thinking clean energy climate action plan, and the Governor, Patrick, has committed to a lot of efforts to transition to clean, safe, sustainable energy. And as Stephanie talked about with the Green Communities Initiative, there's a lot of money that's coming. It's thanks to the fact that we have a cap-and-trade program here in the Northeast. We have RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So all the companies that are paying to pollute, that money is going in to finance the Green Communities program. So I'm here to give you a little regional perspective. Of our 43 cities and towns, 5 of them are municipal utilities, so they're not eligible for green communities. So if you take those out, 40% have already achieved the green communities certification. 15 out of those eligible ones, 6 are working on it, and 17 have tried and failed in the past, but may try again or don't want to do it. But so more than half of the communities around you are also taking action to be a green community and doing similar initiatives. Let's see, I gotta get moving through these things. I guess I went the wrong way. Which way do I go? Right? Thank you. So how many of you have heard of the Sustainable Knowledge Corridor Initiative? A couple people. So the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, we collaborated with the Capital Region Council of Governments in Hartford, and we secured $4.2 million to enhance sustainability in our region. So it includes our 43 cities and towns and 37 in Connecticut. And this is our map. This is really exciting funding from HUD with the Obama administration first being elected. There was a lot of efforts that the government was able to do without necessarily having the blessing of Congress. So there was really a big shift within some of the federal agencies to focus, to look at sustainability, to look at access to opportunity, to understand the integration between transportation and housing and land use and energy use. So we were one of the first regions to be funded because, again, we have so many communities like Amherst and others that are leading the way. And we got basically a tier 2 funding to do both regional sustainability planning, but also implementation. So our motto is plan, do, measure, engage. So we're constantly planning. We're also working to implement. We're making sure we measure to see how we're doing. And then, of course, engaging people. throughout the process. So the Sustainable Knowledge Corridor has a consortium that oversees the work we do. They meet quarterly. It's comprised of municipal officials, people from the colleges and universities, our United Ways, some community advocacy groups, et cetera. This is our definition of our working definition of sustainability. So in terms of the strategic planning, just again to make sure that you know this is happening, just like Amherst has a master plan, we're basically finally sort of putting together a regional comprehensive sustainability plan for the Pioneer Valley. So historically, we've always had a regional transportation plan. We've had a regional economic development plan. We were one of the first regions to develop a clean energy plan. I hope you all know that Massachusetts was one of the first states to adopt the Renewable Portfolio Standard back in 1997, committing us to a path of clean energy, requiring a certain percentage of our energy to be generated from clean, safe, sustainable sources. So we're all paying in if we're part of a big utility, as opposed to the few communities that have municipal utilities. So you're all paying in. That money gets given out in grants to develop things like solar photovoltaic panels on municipal buildings and that sort of thing. So again, we're updating economic development plan to make sure we focus on workforce and access to opportunity. We're updating our transportation plan with a focus on transit-oriented development. We're updating our land use plan, and our energy plan is being developed into not just an energy, but a climate action clean energy plan. We never had a regional housing plan, oddly enough, so now we have one. We didn't have a food security plan, as Carol mentioned, so we do. And Stephanie Stephanie served on our first clean energy our plan and also on our update. So Stephanie's really involved regionally as well as within the town of Amherst. We have a regional environment plan, finally, a brownfields plan, and a green infrastructure plan. All of these plans are going to be up as drafts for public comment in the next couple of weeks at, all spelled out, sustainableknowledgecorridor.org. Unfortunately, we didn't shorten that, so you really literally have to write out sustainableknowledgecorridor.org. But all the plans will be up there for comment. So in addition to planning, obviously most of us are trained planners, we also, as I said, are doing. We took about half of our federal grant and we put it into catalytic projects to try and catalyze efforts that were underway. So one of them was a big research study for transit-oriented development, a market analysis to see how we could site more effective transit stops close to housing, close to grocery stores, close to employment centers. And then we also put $200,000 into I guess I took out all those detailed ones, into Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke for projects that they were moving forward on. So in Springfield, it was Court Square. In Holyoke, it's the new train station. And in Chicopee, it was their Riverwalk. We also have a new sustainability dashboard, which again is at sustainableknowledgecorridor.org, and you can see little measures of how we're doing on sustainability and various aspects of life, housing, energy, greenhouse gas reductions. So again, there's our website, www.sustainableknowledgecorridor. Oh, it's .com. Sorry, I kept saying .org. It's .com. The other thing we did is, anybody part of Leadership Pioneer Valley? Has anybody been involved with that? So we didn't, oddly enough, our region didn't have a leadership training program. Many regions around the country have them. They're usually run by chambers of commerce, that sort of thing. So we finally have one. We're in our year 2. If anybody's interested, there's no age limit, up or down. It's a year-long program where you get tour around the valley, you get to learn what's happening, and you get trained to be a leader, to serve on boards, to just get more actively engaged with a knowledge base in your community. Here's some little bit of detail on the catalytic projects that I mentioned: the market study, Leadership Pioneer Valley, the 3 catalytic projects, and then civic engagement. We partnered with Joseph Krupczynski at UMass, and who's the associate professor in architecture. He designed a very robust, wonderful civic engagement program, working with his students and with the United Ways and community-based groups to make sure that we were engaging populations that are too often left out of traditional planning processes. And again, this was a priority from HUD. So we're getting really wonderful sort of synchronicity between some federal, state, and local agencies at this time. Year 2 of community engagement is just kicking off. So if you'd like to get involved, what we're doing is sort of, we engaged about 150 people last year who are not the usual suspects. Like many of you are the usual suspects. You will show up when you know there's a meeting on a topic that you care about, and you'll show up and speak. But other people don't show up because they don't speak the language, or they don't have access to childcare, or they can't get there, or it's during mealtime. So we made a specific effort working with the United Way and the community-based groups to make sure that we had translation services and transportation and childcare and food. And we engaged a lot of people who don't usually turn out. And so this year we're doing capacity building training for that group to make sure that they have the skills that they need to speak out, to write letters, to run for office, all those sorts of things. So if you'd like to help, we would love to have your participation. Thank you. And again, for those of you who are familiar with community development and civic engagement over time, you know that it's not enough just to inform people or consult with them or involve them or collaborate, but our goal really is to empower people, to improve access to opportunity and get people who don't necessarily feel that they have a say to be able to say. So these are just, every time we did an event, we gave people the opportunity to express how they feel, when is their community sustainable, and we got a nice variety of responses. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say while I'm clicking through that. Oh, April 16th, Judy Wicks is coming to the Clarion for the 4th annual celebration of sustainability for the Pioneer Valley Sustainability Network. So you can go to pvsustain.org and sign up. It's Judy Wicks, the founder of, is it the White Dog Cafe in Philadelphia and in Bali, the Business Alliance for a Local Living Economy. She's coming here. We're really lucky to have her April 16th, 4 to 9 p.m. at the Clarion Hotel in Northampton. She's an exciting speaker. So is everybody going to come? Raise your hand if you're going to come. It's a great party. It's a big dinner party celebration of sustainability. It's definitely the place to be on April 16th at the Clarion. A couple more images here, just again to tell you about thoughts about sustainability. And now we have time for questions. Oh, this is our website, how to get more involved. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So I think we have time for a few questions. Yes.
I have one question for two people, actually. First of all, you spoke about
Oh, yes, thank you.
reduced CO2 curve.
Oh, sir, if you could just, we're handing you a mic. This will allow the TV to pick up your question.
Yeah, you talked about a reduced CO2 curve, and I didn't really see the numbers on the reduced CO2 curve. But my understanding is people are talking about we need to reduce our CO2 emissions or our energy usage to like 2% of what it currently is.
Yeah, they're often talking about reducing it back to a 1980 or 1990 sort of levels. And 350.org argues, based on scientific data, that in fact 350 parts per million is the level of CO2 in the atmosphere where things would remain pretty much as they are. We go above that, which we are already by over 40, that in fact we're going to see some major changes that aren't going to be easily undone. I don't know if that answers your question.
You were showing a reduced you were showing a reduced curve, and then we talked about actual reductions. So we're reducing energy by 1.4%. Meanwhile, we actually need to reduce it to 1.4%. We need to reduce it by 99%.
Yeah, certainly, the more we can do.
That's a huge. That's just a dramatic change for everybody.
Yeah.
I could just address that. 1.4% is for only one thing that we're doing, which is to retrofit our streetlights, our LED streetlights. So we're not saying we're only reducing by 1.4%. The energy reduction plan that the town signed up for in becoming a green community is to reduce our energy use by 20%. So we're looking at fiscal year 2011 as our baseline year. We have to reduce our energy use 20% below that baseline year in 5 years. That's hopefully
Okay.
what will happen.
Peter has a question, and then you, sir.
Microphone.
So I think everything you're doing sounds really good, but it seems like from the breadth of the problem that we're kind of scratching at the surface of something that needs really major changes. And I know that in some towns in different parts of Europe, they've had a transition party take over the city government, and they've made much more far-reaching kinds of things than we've been able to do so far here. So I'm wondering if it would be a good idea if we started a new transition sustainable party in all of our local towns like Amherst and elected a slate of people who could do much more far-reaching things to get us to be leaders in our region that would then make our region a leader in the country to make people make the huge changes that are really needed.
Okay, thank you.
I'll vote for you.
This gentleman had a question. If you could pass it to him, please.
To what extent has the CO2 production of Amherst been reduced by the conversion of the UMass power plant from coal to gas burning and the introduction of cogeneration?
I don't have that exact number, but I know that UMass, I know they have a climate action plan, and you can access that information on their website.
Gas produces half as much CO2 per unit energy as coal does, so that could be significant.
It is significant.
This gentleman was also one of my guest speakers in a former class. He's a climate change expert as well. You're retired from UMass, was that right? Here, yeah. Okay, Ellie had a question in the back. Did you have any follow-up, or did you get your question answered? Okay, all right, Ellie.
I'm wondering, is there any more work that has been accomplished on building a solar array on our old landfill? Is that going to happen, and when?
I don't have the exact information. All I know at this point is that the scale of the array has been downsized a bit, not only in response to issues by the abutters, but also in response to the fact that there is an endangered species that's on the landfill.
Which
There's
one?
Sparrow, I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking. It's a sparrow. It's a species of sparrow. And I have it somewhere, and I know it usually off the top of my head, but I'm just blanking at the moment. But I know, right now it's been tied up with legalities. So, I know that there's some movement towards reducing it and trying to move forward, but I don't know where it stands at this point.
My other question is, we're encouraging individuals to grow their own food, but how does that work when we have local farmers who are trying to make a living by growing food for people to eat? Do you see any contradiction there?
No, I personally, I don't, and maybe Bernard could speak to this too. By the way, it's the grasshopper sparrow. I just wanted to make sure you knew it. I'm totally lost it yet. Personally, I don't see that as conflicting. I think the idea is that, we want to support all agriculture in the community, and that there's a lot of the agriculture that we're supporting is local. We want to support is local. What happens typically is when people go to the supermarket, often what they're purchasing is not necessarily local. So we're trying to offset some of that, if you will, the CO2 emissions that are emitted because of all of that transportation and getting food from Mexico, from California. We can do that more locally, and we could do that and support our local farms, but we can also do it individually as well.
I'll add 2 points. That the percentage of food eaten in Amherst, the percentage of that's produced locally is minuscule. So there's plenty of room for expansion. The other thing is they feed off each other in a useful way. For example, the Simple Gifts Farm up in North Amherst raises chickens, sells eggs. They also teach others how to keep them in their backyard. They find that they sell more eggs when they teach more people how to do that. Part of that is it's hard to do in the winter, and they know the value now, and they go to the farmer who's better set up and better able to provide those needs. So they're finding that by teaching others how to do it, they even sell more. It's counterintuitive, but happening.
Okay, other questions?
I just wanted to say also, it's also true that there's a lot of people that don't have yard space or that they can't grow their own food, so those people can always be served by the farmers regionally. I think when we did our analysis for the food security plan, I think we could grow about, I think we said 20% of our food for the region locally. But right now, the vast majority of the food that's grown locally is shipped to Boston, to markets in Boston. So there's still a lot more need to consume locally.
Okay. Yes, Nani.
I think this is for Stephanie. Covering acres and acres of a field with hundreds of solar collectors is very daunting and scary for the people who are living around it. There are places, I know Germany for one, that requires every new building to have solar collectors on it as part of the building code. It seems to me like a much more practical thing than acres of solar collectors.
Right. Well, there's the issue that, the field, if you will, is a capped landfill. So there's that issue, and even though it has some environmental benefits, there is the issue that it is a capped landfill. So that was one of the reasons why that site was chosen. It wasn't just any field.
I'm
I guess
talking
is the
about
point.
other places, because I live
Right.
near one that was.
Right, but, in looking at becoming more sustainable, that's gonna have to factor in as well. So it's not just one or the other, it's actually all of it. So we wanna start maybe with the landfill, but we do wanna look at roof-mounted systems as well. And that will be coming. I think we have to move in that direction.
Okay, maybe one or two other questions. Yes, sir. And then Melissa. By the way, while we're passing the mic, please fill out your evaluation forms. Someone will collect them as you're leaving. Yes, go ahead.
The central issue seems to be reducing energy consumption. And it's not going to be done just by doing it at the government level. It's got to be done across the board within the community. And if you're trying to do that across the community, then you need to look at the question of penetration of conservation measures, conservation activities. There is, as you know, an energy audit program which is funded by the utilities under orders. And I don't know whether we've ever collected and ever do collect penetration rates. How many homes within Amherst have actually received an energy audit. I know that if I drive down a street, I can do an energy audit the day after any snow by simply looking at the roofs. And you can see the ones that have no snow don't have any insulation in their attics. Frankly, that's something that ought to be done on a regular basis, and if it can't be done by staff, then it ought to be done by volunteers or by high school kids who are paid $10 an hour. And there's any number of ways that could be done, but we ought to get some idea of where there is a need and where it needs to be done on a large scale. In areas where we wanted to do that on a large scale in the past, what you would do is go door to door and encourage things. That's the way crop growing was changed in the 30s. It's the way electrification occurred in the rural areas in the 30s. That's the way things are changed on a large scale in communities. And it seems to me that some of that kind of thing can still be done and should be done. In addition, there are
Do you have a question, sir, if you don't mind my...
Well, I'd like to just chime in before you finish, just to say it's masssave.com.
Thank you.
Masssave.com. The number is something like 866-723-SAVE, but I'm not sure if that's the correct number, but it's something like that. But if you go to masssave.com, every homeowner in Massachusetts is eligible for a free home energy assessment every 2 years, and then you get $2,000 worth of air sealing and insulation, and you get rebates for new furnaces, boilers, that sort of thing. So masssave.com. How many people here have had their MassSave no-cost home energy assessment? Well, there's the penetration among this audience in Amherst.
But that's the whole point. This is not the audience that we need
It's
to
about
reach.
13% statewide.
And they'll
We
change...
have the best program in the Commonwealth,
They'll-
and only 13%.
They'll change every one of your light bulbs. They'll give you new shower heads, and it's all free. Okay, did you have a question for the
The
panel?
question really is, to what degree are we trying to do that kind of outreach on a door-to-door kind of level?
Well, I don't know about door-to-door. That is staff time-wise. I'm only part-time as well. Both Susan and I have part-time positions. And door-to-door, it's kind of virtually impossible for me to do that and to me to sort of organize that. But I mean, we're working in that direction. We do workshops. We've had workshops on energy audit programs for at least the last 5 or 6 years. In fact, there's going to be a few coming up at the Jones Library within the next month or so. We just did a weatherization workshop on weatherizing and making windserts for your windows. Those programs do happen, and we do publicize them. In fact, we used to have when we had an energy task force and I was the energy task force coordinator, we had October's Energy Awareness Month. I put together an entire calendar's worth of programs for the entire month of October. We had at least 25 events and hardly anybody showed up. Those inserts were I had them printed out and put in the Amherst Bulletin. So they were in every single Amherst Bulletin that went out that month, at the beginning of that month. And we had very little people show up. And I've heard that consistently, not just from the programs that I'm doing, but consistently from others as well. It's very difficult to get people to the table. And I think your idea about having community meetings is something that is sort of spreading more and more, and people are starting to do more and more. And actually, the group that I work with most closely is holy cow.
Center for
CET, thank you.
Ecotechnology.
It's late, I'm tired, sorry.
It's the
Center for Ecotechnology. I've been working very closely with them, and they're the group that we, when we talk about sort of how do we brainstorm and get people out, we talk about doing things like, meetings in people's neighborhoods and more of that.
So
We do, and you know what? It's not always easy to get them to the table either. In fact, the high school, it's been very problematic because of scheduling when they are at the end of their day, the end of my day. It doesn't always work. We try, and we have a sustainability festival, and we invite all those groups to come, and typically they do. They do at least show up to that event.
And there's also numerous groups working in the area. The Unitarian Church in Northampton is going to be doing one of those Center for Ecotechnology window insert workshops in March. And a lot of groups are working on something we haven't even talked about here tonight, which is divestment from the fossil fuel industry. And that's a major point, and it's perhaps another lecture topic. One last
Carol,
question.
Maybe I could just add to that
Yes.
quickly and say that your question leads to what we're trying to do with the transition neighborhoods, transition streets, is to achieve the not just the usual suspects distributed around, but to actually get a critical mass in a location where they know each other can walk. The approach of how do we get everyone together is to throw a party. And if there's anybody here who wants to, the block party, start there, start with regular block parties, and that will lead to a lot of conversation about what do we need to do locally. And then, go to everybody else's workshop on how to get that one bit of knowledge you need.
Everyone here can tell 5 friends about this forum, and it's going to be replayed on Amherst Media numerous times, and they can all be as well educated as you. One last question.
I have a small question, but we're talking a lot about purchasing food locally and goods locally, and my concern is for low-income families in Amherst. And how can we make local food and organic food available to low-income families here? I know in Northampton, Grow Food Northampton has a program where they have farmers markets going into housing complexes, and that they accept food stamps, and it's $4 worth of goods for $1 of food stamps. And I haven't heard anything like that here in Amherst, and I'd be happy to work on something like that. But I would like to know if somebody has started anything like that.
Grow Food Amherst, I mentioned it in my presentation.
Yeah.
We have a Grow Food Amherst group, and we've just started, and already we've done quite a bit. We literally just started like this past fall. And we've got a bunch of initiatives that we're working on, and certainly that's one of the issues that comes up, and the idea is how this neighborhood challenge, this growing more gardens locally, part of that is to get more food to people, the very community that you're addressing. How can we grow food so that we can deliver it to our neighbor, or we can grow food for our neighbor? That's part of the idea. So go to growfoodamherst.org.
I will. Thank you.
And you could join us.
Our farmers markets get twice, if you have SNAP food stamps, you get twice as much food for your quantity of food stamps.
Not this year.
Not here?
They had a grant for it last year. They didn't.
I'd like to thank our 5 speakers. I think that all of us tonight are thinking green a lot. And we're kind of, I think, a group that can do something about the cultural change that we face, doing these things that we need really to take very seriously. And there will be things coming to town meeting. Watch and be ready to think and talk to your neighbors when issues come up in the right direction that we should be going. I'd like to thank Amherst Media, which is a wonderful source of information for the community, and it will be rebroadcasting the program tonight over and over, so tell your friends, and stay warm, and thank you for coming.